sun, half star. Oh, Solangelo. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast about Percy, Jackson, and the whole wide rest of the Riordanverse. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara, and today we're giving you our spoiler-filled review of The Sun and the Star and Nico Di Angelo Adventure.
Ranking Rick Riordan is available on youtube.com/doingok and podcast services around the world. Now let's get into some housekeeping.
All right. Welcoming Clara back from the faraway lands. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Is Wales really that far away?
I mean, it's not close.
Farther than other places.
You know what? Fair enough.
And I just want to say, so we are going full spoilers. If you want to hear our spoiler-free thoughts, we already did that video/podcast. So look back in our previous times. I'll probably put a link up in the YouTube video. But all that said, let's dive into it. It's been a little while since it came out, so we've had a time to let it percolate. Clara, I have no idea what you think about this.
This is exciting.
You go first.
So I guess big shocker, I really liked this book.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated that well, let's just put Hidden Oracle, whatever that was. Let's just throw that away for a second. It gave us the opportunity to see for the first time this relationship in any sort of serious way. And it let us just really focus on two people. Like, This was not, let's meet Will, but also let's meet four other characters. And also it's the penultimate blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We could really focus. I really liked that. I thought this had some really, I don't mean to say grown up because it was really adolescent, but I mean that in the best way. Really great teen relationship stuff without feeling after school specially to me. And finally, I love Nico as always. And it was a joy to finally really get his perspective because I feel like I understand him a bit better now.
Yeah. I am really with you, Clara, on the it feeling very adult. Their relationship feels very mature. To me, maybe a criticism is they kind of felt more like they were in their 20s than in their teens. But I mean, trauma's gonna do that to you. It'll age you up real fast, being a demigod. Having now it been 2 weeks since we finished reading it. I feel like the positive feelings have lingered more than my criticisms.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, in some ways, maybe struggle with this podcast because I am kind of not really in the headspace of where I was even during our
last
spoiler-free thing. And I did listen to that ahead of this to maybe give me a refresher, even when we didn't go into specifics. But yeah, I just kind of walk away from it only remembering the good. I know there was less good or stuff that we were about, but it doesn't bother me as much now. So I think that it leaving that impression is really impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I agree with you to an extent where I feel like the things I remember the most are the good parts. And obviously, I completely agree with Clara that the star of this book is the two of them and their relationship and diving into them each individually and making them feel more like fully realized people. And then also their relationship being multidimensional and teaching interesting lessons, multiple different lessons, I would say, all worthwhile. Most of them, I agree, not super after school especially, but I mean, we can have a little bit of a debate about that. But I will say that while I don't necessarily linger on the things I didn't like as much, I do still have a bit of a bad aftertaste from some of that stuff. I mean, so Clara / anyone who didn't listen to our spoiler-free review, I'll say that me and Olga, at least back in the day, Olga.
No, I'm still with you. I just am saying I'll remember it when we do the recap and all of that. It'll come back. I'm a negative person, but hey.
I just think there is a lot of extra stuff in this book that doesn't need to be there. There is an excessive amount of talking about Tartarus and people rediscovering things that have already been discovered in previous books. And I don't get a whole lot out of, oh, now we're being digested like they were last time.
Yeah.
And now we're, drinking from the phlegathon like they did last time.
Yeah.
I can totally be there with you. I feel like reading this book in isolation as itself is one thing, and like putting it into the larger Riordan plus verse, it feels a little bit different for me.
Yeah. I mean, when I say that the positive feelings are what remain, it's like if someone were to just kind of ambush me and go like, what did you think of the sun and the star? Rah! Like then I'd be like, I love Nico and Will and he are like dedicated to each other. That's really nice. And like all of, and exploring death. Yeah. And then, but yeah, the second you started talking about like, we hear this again, I was like, oh, right. I got kind of bored in the middle there I got bored and frustrated and to varying degrees as well.
I will say, so we can say a few positive things that we couldn't talk about before, as far as I think that the Epiel's nightmare sequence is like a really good standout sequence that is one of the better Riordanverse sequences. I think that Persephone and Hades both get really great moments. I'm very interested to talk about the Piper stuff near the end. I think there was some good there and some stuff I didn't completely love, but most people I feel like really like that. Anything else that stood out to you?
I mean, for me, I think this was like a Nyx redemption. In terms of like what, giving her better things. I thought there was some really effective horror with the like Mansion of Night. House of Night. That's
Mansion of Night.
Yeah, House of Night was a terrible vampire book series I read a lot of. I mean, I agree with you. I also, where I disagree with you is I'm pretty sure it's Epiales, but okay.
I don't know. The audiobook voiceover guy said a lot of things in ways that I did not expect them to say them. So who knows? But he said Epiel, so that's what it is in my brain.
Sure.
Clara, what did you...
I'd like to... Yeah, Mr. D, really enjoyed. I always really like when they, like, take him seriously for a minute, while still continuing to make him comedic. I really need to hear, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but, like... I know how much you hate the Trogs.
Do I hate the Trogs?
You kind of do.
You have talked about it several times.
You're on record.
In regards to Tower of Nero, specifically, being like, why is it not the best? The friggin' Trogs. So I'd like to know whether this was any level of Trog redemption for you, or whether it's the same, or whether it takes the book down for you.
Trog redemption.
I will say I'm of two minds. Overall, if I was going to give an overall feeling about the Trogs in this book, I would be neutral.
Please do.
I would be neutral overall. I do not think that His Majesty is very well written.
Yeah.
I feel like they were going for something there, but it was very rushed. And, stuff like I was thinking about how, like, right after, like, the day after His Majesty meets Will, they adorn the same sort of hat as Will. And I'm like, what if at the end of their journey, when they were parting, Will just took off his hat and gave it to His Majesty, and that was the journey, and up until that point, His Majesty still didn't have a hat.
Yeah.
And they had actually formed a bond, and that had led to that. And stuff like, for half a second you see them herding the herd, and then suddenly that's their life's ambition. It felt very...
It was a lot. It was really weird. And I confession, like with many of the things I've been reading, I read this all one go on a flight. And it was like, God, I don't even know how to explain how early it was and what a liminal space this plane trip was. But like, I was going through these Trogs and I kept on just chuckling, being like, hey, I wonder what Dan is thinking about this.
Yeah, I overall like the Trogs in this, but I did feel like His Majesty felt a little clumsy. And maybe even like self-inserty. I don't know. I don't know who.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an aspect of that too with like they're amazing at combat and defeat a Draken, and it's like, why is this?
Yeah, why is this happening right now all of a sudden?
Yeah.
That said, I think the joke is funny of the name.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't like atrocious or anything. I just was like, that's a choice, you know?
I was reading this, I was like, it's time for trauma, it's time for a serious book. And it's just pages of trauma.
Lulls you into a false sense of despair, and then it hits you with drugs.
Like, and the other thing I was thinking of was like, but I can't criticize this too much because then we'll have to rank Tower of Hero lower.
Oh, man.
You can't take points off for Trogs.
No, but like, let's pretend I never said this when it comes to the rankings, but I don't understand why so much of this book was Trogs.
I mean, that's the thing where it's kind of weird how much of this book is retreading previously discussed things. And again, some of them are improvements.
Or are just fun callbacks.
Right. But it's there are just a few things that took me out of it in that regard. But I didn't read it all at once. So maybe if I had been in more of a like, you're stuck reading it, maybe I wouldn't have been as distracted.
Let's talk about the continuity stuff, because that was something we like hit on in the spoiler-free thing, but couldn't say specifics. And so I'll say, as far as the positive stuff, I really love that they like brought back Echidna, who we haven't seen since Lightning Thief. I thought that was cool. Dr. Thorne, my
Dan's
favorite.
Oh, that was the other thing. I was like, Dan, it's for you. I like am grinning. There's a person next to me. I'm like trying not to like creep out with my expressions.
The Samphalian birds starting from Sea of Monsters.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about them is I got them confused with Strixes, who are the birds from the beginning of the Burning Maze. And those birds are like way more dangerous. So I got very confused when they weren't like that. And then I realized I was confusing them. Yeah. But there are a few continuity errors, or at very least muddled continuity. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that we talked about is, one is he meaning Rick, tries to retcon us into believing that Hypnos was the one who did the making everybody fall asleep in The Last Olympian. Hypnos did not do that. That was Morpheus, who I believe is either Hypnos' son or father.
I thought son.
I think it's son. I think you're right. So that was just an odd one, because that just straight up wasn't true. And the fact that it even like kind of mattered for the plot, because that's why Hypnos was there to begin with.
Yeah.
That was an odd one. I think it's pretty weird when we meet the Mania that Nico is like, there's a line that's like straight up like, Nico had never heard of a Mania being a soul before. And then like 3 sentences later, it's like, oh, but you know, Reyna's father was a Mania. And so the only 2 times we've ever met Manias in the series
parents
have been souls that were turned into Manias.
Yeah.
So between Jason's mom
and Reyna's dad. And it was like, these are important character, like emotional trauma scenes. And I really, as much as I enjoyed
Amphitrite.
Thank you. And that was really cool. It was just like, oh, when you started on this note, well, that's the thing. It didn't start on that note. I was really enjoying it and the discovery of it being a mania, of him being a mania. And then it's like, oh, what? He's a soul. I was like, no, why? Now I'm confused.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that made me have to go back and read stuff, because as I was trying to figure out if this was somehow a different version than we'd seen before.
Yeah.
Different version.
Especially because I didn't totally remember that they defeated them with Imperial Gold.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a difference with the Stygian Iron. I mean, it's all very, it was confusing.
It was confusing. And the thing is that it's supposed to be like scary.
Yeah.
To a degree, well, I mean, because he claws Nico's face and he
Mhm.
gets a cool scar over his eye. Like, of course he does. I'm surprised he didn't have one already. But yeah, it's coming in the.
Yeah.
He did deserve it just because Goth Boy.
I mean, he didn't deserve an injury, but he deserves all
Right.
the cool things. He deserves everything, I think, to quote one of my heroes, 80s.
But yeah, that's the thing where even though that like bothered me at the time and now it's annoying me again as we discuss it, like it's not something I remember in my overall recollection of the book.
Yeah. There are also, I'm not going to go into all the specifics. There are some just straight up errors in the book, such as one time he's talking about his mom and he calls her Bianca.
Whoops.
But I'm not going to go into all of those, but there are a few of those. I feel like they could have used another time in the editing suite. But and then the other big continuity thing that bothered me and Olga was when we get to Bianca, and Bianca is canonically in the real world now.
She's been reborn.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right. I was really confused.
I feel like he tries to have his cake and eat it too, where it's like, oh, it's part of their soul, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so if you want to, you can sort of be like, oh, this is like residual Bianca or something, or like an echo. But they very much imply that he is like in Elysium and like gonna like rest peacefully now.
It's or is attempting.
Yeah.
Elysium. Yeah. I mean, I think that it kind of would have worked maybe better if it was just the mom. Because we really have had so little of her. And Bianca is like, dare I say, such a controversial character in the fandom that in some ways this book really felt like it was almost targeted for less obsessive fans. Like, it was targeted for casual readers.
But then, like we were saying, there were all those really interesting callbacks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we went to the live show, like it's not a live show. It was a book launch
event. Yes.
Yeah, with Mark and Rick and their editor, who impersonated Gorgira. By the way, she was like dressed in a dress that had like faces on it and had a wig and was like, I don't know this editor of whom you speak. Tell me a story. And Rick and Mark were like, we didn't know this was happening. Like, she did not tell us.
We were the first stop on the tour.
Yeah. So. And Becky came out. And we were like, Becky.
Yay!
Yeah. Anyway, where I was like, it was the reason I bring this up is that clearly, like, based on like, what was it, like 2,000 people? They said it was like some insane amount of people there. And it was full of obsessive fans. Like people, while we were waiting to exit, people could not keep themselves from starting to read. And I'm like, these are the people who know the canon.
Well, I would argue that the reason you don't just do the mom is kind of for the long-term fans who don't really have a connection to the mom, but do have a connection to Bianca. And so him letting go of his grief for Bianca kind of means more to us than the mom, even though for him, the mom might be even bigger. Yeah. But like the fact that they're at the Lotus Hotel and all like that's meaningful to people who have read the whole series. At the same time, I was like really expecting going into this book that it would turn me around on Bianca. And they didn't even try.
No.
So whatever.
They're like, it is what it is. Whoops.
It's not a Bianca Di Angelo story.
I was just like, it would have been so easy to have like one of the nightmares or one of the flashbacks involve her talking to Nico after she became a hunter. Like, just give us more of that story and flesh her out more there. We also talked about why was there not a Bob flashback? Or Oregon Dream, where we got to see Nico and Bob's relationship form, because it's like the crux of the whole book to a degree.
Yeah. One of my issues with this book is I love Nico and Will and everything that their story entails. And I kind of don't understand anything else that happens. And I don't really mind. I still really enjoyed the book, and I come away from it with a good energy. But I don't understand what's going on with Bob. I don't understand what Nyx was actually trying to do. I don't like. There are things I just don't get.
I kind of
okay.
understand. I understand Nick's, I think, which we can get to that. But I would say overall, I think this book succeeds at what its main goals were, which I think were to give a very solid story of their relationship and of Nico's healing.
Yes.
And that, all these little nitpicks I have aside, like that's not what's going to matter going forward in this mythology.
Yeah. That's the thing where I'm like, I am really into their relationship now, and I am very proud of the character that Nico has gotten to be, and like that this is a journey that his character got to go on, and it's really gratifying. And that's like the main thing. And then my other complaints we will discuss as as we do recap. But just on Bob, I really thought that I thought Bob was going to be like a red herring. And that was on me for thinking that was going to be subverted, because it was advertised as they rescue Bob. And I was like, they're going to rescue more than Bob. And it's like, no, they rescue Bob and little Bob. There you go.
Small Bob.
I was distracted in my brain also being like, and the Cocoa Puffs that didn't exist before, but I love now.
I do like that, yeah.
So, Nico and the Cocoa Puffs. Coming to CBS this fall.
I do like the twist that Hades is the one who sent the prophecy, though.
That was great.
All right, should we get into the recap?
Let's do it.
There's lots to cap.
Oh, boy. I'm scrolling.
I did my best, but there's a lot.
Yeah. Okay, Nico and Will debate which Star Wars character they'd date as they see Austin and Kayla off for fall via the Grey Sisters taxi. Nico,
I put that there because we have to stop and say which Star Wars character would we date? Darth Vader?
Yeah, Darth Vader.
On brand, yes.
Old version or young version?
Either.
That's
different.
True.
They bring different things.
Surprised you're not a Kylo.
No, that's gross.
He's Darth Vader's grandson.
No. I don't shame anyone who is into that, but I'm not. Not for me.
I would go with like episode 2 Padme. Episode 3 Padme is pretty lame. I mean, most of it was and the directing. And the fact that most of them had never done green screen before.
Any Natalie Portman is good, Natalie Portman.
Was never a Princess Leia fan, personally.
I don't have an emotional connection to these.
What about Yoda?
Thank you, Dan.
Hot stuff.
Maybe the Mandalorian without the helmet.
With the helmet.
I just feel like if it's just a date, I feel like Han could be really fun. Like, I feel like he'd show me a really good time.
Yeah.
I think Finn would be a nice...
I was thinking Finn.
I would cuddle with Finn, and it would be delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would... Yeah. He would charm you, sweep you off your feet.
I always felt like if they just wrote her a little bit better, I could be a Rey fan. But they never quite got there.
We're spending so much time on this.
Fine. Moving on. Oh, the Grey Sisters are another major callback here.
Yes, thank you. Bringing it back to this mythology.
Which of the Grey Sisters would you date?
What was her name? The one with the eye.
Whoever has the eye.
So Nico thinks a lot, bringing us up to speed on his current brooding. He's been having nightmares and is avoiding the prophecy Rachel gave him. And he's also been getting therapy from Mr. D, God of Insanity. Nico has a big, bad dream. He sees his mom, Bianca, Kronos, his jar.
His special little jar.
His timeout corner, his timeout jar. Cupid, and more. Plus, he has no mouth.
Yep.
Great. Which I think is a pretty common nightmare.
Although, I thought this was well done.
Yeah.
I think nightmare sequences can be tricky, I think, especially in books, but also in any medium. They can get kind of blah because you're like, none of this really has stakes. But I thought they did a good job of really using it to show his psyche and to touch on
Yeah.
variety of trauma that he's had.
Yes.
And to make nice callbacks, like I didn't expect to see Kronos.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Well, on top of that, like, in this world, dreams and nightmares have had so much importance and significance that I just generally take them more seriously as a storytelling device than I do with, like, maybe other more tropic uses of it. Yeah. Also, the paperback. Oh, Clara, so you read this on Kindle, right? Was there anything like textural imagery wise on the pages?
The darkness.
Imagery, no. But there was...
The darkness.
So...
Ooh, no. No. I had things that said dream sequence.
You can actually see in the book here, you see how some of the pages are straight up like black? So in the published version, the printed version, you explain it better.
Yeah, so in the printed version, there's like... We'll give it back. I wanted to pick up the... Do it. Give it. Gimme.
It's like stuck to the stand.
Oh, I thought you were going to hold the stand while I picked up the book. But movie magic, we'll edit this out. Do you see how there's like smoke kind of on there? Yeah. So that is whenever there's like a dream sequence or flashback, it's on the pages.
Okay.
And then we have the Tartarus sequence is like straight up just like a black border. So it's a bit different. It's like, it's oppressive Tartarus. And this is Nico alone in Tartarus. This isn't like when they go to Tartarus together. This is Nico's recollection of it.
So this makes so much sense because I was just scrolling through and then it would be like dream sequence. And I was like, okay, like, sure.
All right. So Nico wakes up. Will comforts him, and Rachel appears and barfs out the same prophecy again. Nico fills in Chiron and Mr. D about the prophecy and his mission to save Bob from Tartarus. It can't wait anymore, and they can't convince him out of going. Will insists on joining him. They question Nico, leaving something of equal value behind, and he fears Will might sacrifice himself. And Will fears Nico will sacrifice himself, so...
Yeah, interesting thing is, I don't know. We answered a question about this prophecy in feedback in a podcast that I think still isn't out. But do you remember this? Because we got something being like, what is he going to end up leaving behind? And I think that might be on like the Tree of Wishes podcast or something that I have recorded but isn't out yet. And I definitely called that it was going to be some metaphor. There wasn't going to be like a real, actual tragedy. But...
Good job.
Yeah.
Metaphors.
Yeah, good.
So they pack a lot and take an excessive amount of taxis and trains. Yet they don't pack Will a weapon.
Nope. That would be crazy.
I'm still angry. Like, speaking of negative that is the one that is like, why did you leave this out? Also, why didn't you take the Grey Sisters taxi and save us a lot of pages?
Will didn't want to.
No, Will didn't want to.
He coulda.
But I kind of liked saying goodbye to Kayla and Austin.
I mean, I did too.
Yeah.
But anyway, they could have taken the train. So Will talks about being attacked by evil pigeons with his mom as a kid.
Yeah,
great.
I like this. I mean, again, I think that this section took a long time.
Yeah.
But I like anytime we get a little bit more about Will and we learn about his mom and all that stuff, I thought was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Will's backstory was really effective here. I like Will. I like Will. I've always liked Will, but now I really like Will.
I think I have a really hard time squaring like my feeling about Apollo as like a dweeb and like with Will's mom who seems like way too cool for him. I just like try to imagine it and it's just sort of funny to me. So it's interesting. I imagine reading this without having read all of Trials of Apollo and it would feel totally different.
Yeah. I liked, also, speaking of Apollo, I liked Will's references to him of like when he was Lester and now, you know, we solved the problem of the Roman emperors, but now I might never see my dad again. And like, clearly he's got mixed emotions about that too, so that was satisfying.
I remember we were talking and I was saying, I kind of wish that Apollo had shown up in this. There were a few lines here and there near the end where they're talking about basically like the messages of the book, where it felt like it was a little too grown up and it didn't really feel like it should have been coming out of their mouths a lot of the time. And I felt like if they were discussing the same topics, but like with Apollo, who was a god and has been around a lot longer,
and has now been traumatized by his own experience,
and who could be like the elder queer person. I think that might have been a nicer way to sort of do it, but that's my feeling.
No, I forgot about that. So thanks for mentioning it. So they stopped by Sally Jackson's, everyone's mom, to Iris message Perkabeth for advice. Annabeth forgot all about Bob, which is a line that had to be included for some reason.
Annabeth was weird here.
Yep.
Like, this was the thing that felt the weirdest to me, was how Annabeth was written. And on the one hand, I'm like, I hope she's just having a blast in college, and that's why she feels off to me, but she didn't feel like herself.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is my least favorite part of the book, I think.
Yeah.
This is the thing that I was worried about going into the book, as far as, like, why do we feel like we need to, like, so directly compare the two couple stories? And the fact that, like, between her forgetting straight up, which I think is ridiculous and would never happen, and that, like, there's a few lines from Nico that are, like, very judgmental about them leaving Bob behind and being like, Bob wouldn't want them because they left them behind and stuff. And they're never questioned, even though, like, the message of that story was Percy learning to be able to let people go.
Because his whole journey is like, I'm the hero. I save everyone. Like, and he can't. Like,
then,
he's
like,
condemning that without any
question.
pushback felt really weird to me.
Yeah. On the other hand, I liked this. Well, there should have been some questioning of it, and I think it should have happened later on. And maybe, like, it could have happened with Bob, but whatever.
Yep.
God forbid, like, Bob and Nico have a conversation. But, like, Nico has all these feelings that are sort of unresolved about Percy with Bianca.
Yeah.
And, like, this whole, like, Percy just, like, lets things happen, and it doesn't really faze him. Because he and Percy also haven't really had a conversation that is, like, grown up, where they're both on the same... I mean, like, they kind of have, but that could have been here.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
That is a good point, that, like, ever since they introduced this idea of Nico having a crush on Percy, it kind of, like, we kind of have lost... Like, the Nico-Percy dynamic was, like, a pretty key dynamic to the original series. And we basically don't get any of that after the original series. It's just just Nico walking him from afar, and then Nico saying, I'm over you, and Percy being like, ah.
Yeah.
But, like, you forget that, like, the two of them bouncing off of each other was, like, so key to the 4th and 5th book.
Yeah,
no, and Nico really feels like Percy lets people down.
Yeah.
And, like, is just so caught up in being the big hero that he can't think about the other people around, like the sidekicks.
Yeah.
And, like, that was still evident to me here, and I love that was still a part of his character, but it's still unresolved, and it feels a little unfair to Percy where he's at in his growth.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the fact that this book exists gives me hope that this isn't the last Nico Di Angelo adventure, and that we get more, like, reconciliation on this. I would really like another Percy's story is never done. Like, we're getting Chalice of the Gods, like, all of that.
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, like, Dan and I talked about this on the spoiler-free version of, like, well, could Rick be also considering maybe handing off complete control and letting someone else like Mark just run with the Nico books and that kind of thing, Nico and Will. But I do hope that that there's more in the future where they can really, like, reconcile their relationships as young adults.
That said, I'm like, I don't know if we need it. I mean, specifically more Nico books, because I feel like this book is so definitively, like, you know, he's dealt with his demons and all, like, I'm not to say that, like, I am glad it's not like they're saying, oh, now he's totally fine and whatever. But, like, this is clearly, like, the core story, everything leading up to now in this. I mean, there can always be other side things and whatever, but I do worry about, especially going into Chalice of the Gods, are we just going to keep doing stories for the sake of doing stories? Or is there, like, an actual impetus? Whereas I feel like there was very clearly an impetus for this book.
Yes.
But I don't know if there would be for a second one, other than that this one did well.
Well, but that leads me to think more about, like, Greek and many, like, a lot of folklore and mythology is that there is, like, the ultimate, like, the main story of this character, but then they feature in other stories. They, like, have other adventure, and they might not be, like, as emotionally rooted or as much of a lesson learned or growth, but they're still, like, worth telling. I think that if Rick / Mark / someone, like, if there is a story idea that they feel is worth writing, I think that there's room for that. I think that they're creative people and that they can still explore that. Like, how many years has it been since a Percy book? And the emotional territory that that Rick is going to explore with Chalice of the Gods about, like, his challenge is not like the end of the world. It is going to college. Like, that's something that we maybe thought was a foregone conclusion because we already had the mentions of Percy struggled, but he got into New Rome University. Like,
I'm very interested to see how I end up taking Chalice of the Gods, because I may end up eating my words. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I think there's a story to be told about the 7 that was never really resolved. Not about individuals within it, but about their dynamic. Like, they have not processed Jason.
Oh, like, we're going to talk about Jason.
This, like, they have not done that. And I think I wish Chalice, and I know it's not gonna, but I wish it was about, like, the 6 of us, like, but it's about the relationship of those 7 people. Like, let's all figure out who we are in relationship to each other, like, what we're doing, something like that.
I'm also interested in, like, at the end of Tower of Nero, there was the whole thing where the council of Bast and Mimir and like, do you think that was just, like, to add color? Like, is that not actually leading to something? I
don't understand.
It could have just been, like, a fun call out to be like, oh yeah, all of them, like, but it seemed like they were getting together because something was coming. So,
I think that's Rick leaving himself room to explore. And he's an odd duck.
I guess that's the thing is, at this point, we got this Nico book. I would rather have Daughter of the Deep 2, more Magnus, more Kane Chronicles. Like, there's so many other things.
What about a Piper story?
Piper is definitely high on the list.
That, to me, Piper is, like, a guarantee. Like, that to me, a Piper standalone, 100%.
I would also be on board with a Hazel standalone.
Me too.
I would too. I feel like that character needs some more excitement.
Or a Hunters of Artemis standalone would be awesome too. You get Reyna and Thalia, and
that would be so
that'd
cool.
Be so good.
Because my worry about Hazel or Frank, who I like both of them and would want both of them to lead a book, I don't want it to be another relationship book. Like, it would feel a little silly if it was like Percy and Annabeth did this thing and then they did this thing.
They can all go to Tartarus. It's like a rite of passage.
God, I never want to go to Tartarus again. I'm done.
That's what planning our wedding is.
I feel like I'm being digested by
florists.
Oh my God,
capitalists.
My wallet is being digested, that's for sure. My savings.
All right, where were we?
I don't know. We've taken so many. Oh, yeah. Annabeth is weird. Percy's kind of a bad guy, according to Nico.
Anyway.
All right. Percabeth tells Solangelo that their best chance at surviving is leaning on each other and remembering their love and connection. But they do that differently than Percy and Annabeth.
Yeah, which I do appreciate.
I love that, yes.
Yeah.
Will and Nico go to the door of Orpheus because Hades has forbidden mortals from entering the underworld. While traveling down the stairs, something is wrong.
Ooh.
They start going crazy and are trapped in confusing nightmares. We get cool callbacks to Dr. Thorne and Will's quest with Lester and Meg. Dr. Thorne. Eventually, they are able to confront Epiales, the demon of nightmares. Nico struggles against them and ultimately will blast the demon away with a beam of pure sunlight.
This was cool.
Yeah.
I liked his new powers.
So Epiales
Me too.
vanishes, but leaves behind vague threats about their mother waiting for them. Wanting for them is also accurate, but yes.
I was happy at how quickly we go from the mention of mother to Nico saying, hey, it's Nyx.
Yeah.
Because I immediately assumed it was Nyx.
Yeah.
And a lot of these books oftentimes would have waited like 20 chapters to,
Yeah. It was not too much of a... And if you really didn't see it coming, then it's enough of a surprise, but it's like... the interactions with Nyx and Nyx like taunting Nico later on also.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that even if people who have read the books, especially if you've only like read them once or whatever, you might not even remember Nyx. Like unless you know what Nyx is supposed to be, that section in House of Hades is just like one of 100 monsters.
That is
basically.
very true. Yeah. Yeah, like Aklis is a bigger deal.
Oh, yeah.
So the couple reaches the troglodytes' new home in the underworld that Nico carved out for them. They meet up with Screech Bling, His Majesty, and the rest of the Council of Trogs, and Nico reveals what happened the last time he went to Tartarus. Some bad stuff happened. He drank firewater, and Nemesis gave him some seeds because she wanted to help correct the imbalances in his heart. Nico stumbled upon Nyx and Hypnos arguing, and Nyx took quite an interest in him. He's devastated, mentally mostly, by Nyx and the Mansion of Night, but ultimately she hands him over to the Giants. Her parting words to Nico are about wanting to see him again if he survives Gia and the Giants.
I love the bugs.
So
horrible.
I can't remember if that was in House of Hades or not.
I don't either, but like this will not be quickly forgotten. the whole like Nico can't unsee, like his brain breaks and he like sees how things really are, which is something again like we knew about Tartarus, but like the way they go about it with Nico and the fear of that happening to Will later on, I was like, oh God, this is we're recording this from a room that 3 years ago, right?
No, don't even bring it up.
No, I'm gonna because I'm tortured. Had a spider infestation and Dan couldn't really see them, and I'm horribly afraid of spiders. It was one of the worst like 4-day periods of my life. Oh God.
I do want to say after Nico tells his tale, I think this is one of the points where I was wishing that we had seen some stuff of Bob and Nico interacting because I was like, wow, that sounds really bad. Maybe you should just not go because also the way Nico described it, it was so clearly like, yeah, there's literally nothing you can do against her. Why are you trying to do this? You have no plan. And I, like, again, if like he was going to save Will, I'd be like, yeah, you're being irrational. Of course you're going to do, like, I wouldn't question it. Yeah. But with Bob, like, they made it sound like he and Bob would, like, you know, hang out and talk once in a while he sweeps some things up. Like, it was, you know, like work buddies or something.
Yeah.
But I think this all goes to his trauma with everyone else, right? Like, he's so afraid of getting left behind. Yeah. So he's projecting. And so, like, it works, but I completely agree that, like, you have to be willing to believe that he's projecting, which means you have to be really invested in Nico, I think.
Well, not hard.
And you have to be like, Will has to, like, I mean, I guess Will is very invested in Nico, which makes sense. But I'm like, if I was Will hearing the story, I'd be like, seems like that we have no chance of succeeding at all.
I think Will is pretty on record about that, honestly. I think Will is like this. Yeah. Are we really doing that? Like, I love you, but are we doing this?
Are you sure Bob is worth it? Are you sure?
It's not a lot on the page to prove that, but such.
Dan, who would you be more likely to go to TARDIS for, Bob or Subala?
Probably Subala. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I hate Bob. I liked Bob quite a bit in House of Hades. I just thought that he had a fitting end. And I wasn't like, like waiting for hopefully someday we'll come back to this. Like just the same way that in this book, Jameson still isn't back. And I'm like, that's okay. Sometimes things happen. So it's...
Yeah. I mean, it felt like a sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly.
In House of Hades. So like this.
Well, and especially, you remember when we were reading, the fourth and fifth book of Heroes of Olympus, and they weren't killing off characters, and it was supposed to be this giant war, and there were 7 main people. At least Bob and Damison were sacrificed, but now that's not even true.
Right. Just Jason.
Again, I don't have a problem with like Bob coming back. I have a problem with like not understanding his and Nico's relationship because, and again, this book uses Bob as like a mechanism, and I know that just like Nico thinking about the mania, we'll get to that, like is also, and like caring about him is also his like being bigger than his trauma and still thinking like I get it, but at the same time we have flashbacks, we have like the fact that he didn't even really feature in Nico's nightmares either was like really strange.
I mean, that's the thing. I don't think that like Bob being the mechanism is bad because of what you and Clara are saying about the symbolism of it. I just think that it could have been better if it worked on more than just a symbolic level. Like if we were invested in what was specifically happening in the plot.
Or even if Mr. D said, Nico, it sounds like you're projecting. And Nico was like, maybe, but who cares? And Mr. D was like, true. Like if there was some like acknowledgement of that, because otherwise I think maybe what it's doing is like rationalizing that projection, which is not like
it's actually funny because you saying that, I'm like, it actually would have been better if Mr. D was the one that was captured.
I was thinking that as well.
And that would have been
because
great.
we had actual like, oh, he was his therapist. I understand why he's a meaningful person in his life. Like,
and the fact that he's an Olympian is like, okay, all right.
And what if it had been oh my God, I'm blanking on his name, the Mania.
Oh, Amphitrite.
Oh,
yeah. There's a whole mechanism set up there. That would have been really cool. It's fine. I'm glad Bob is okay.
Bob and Small Bob together forever. Cleaning up at Camp Half-Blood.
I still feel really, I don't know. Okay. It's whatever.
I agree. So now we know Nyx captured Bob to lure Nico back. Nyx hates change and believes what is dark should stay dark. Bob and Nico are an affront to her philosophy and understanding of the world. She's a conservative.
Yeah. No, this is I think Nyx is a very clear commentary on transphobia.
Yeah.
And I think that they're using it for more than just transphobia, but I think that you can't deny that connection there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they talk, even with Piper about people changing, and so it's not. I don't think it's just about transgenderism as much as I think it
transphobia.
Yeah, but
I see what you're saying.
I think it is about how people aren't just one thing, and that can be hit on in a lot of different ways.
It's more than like gender and sexuality. Yeah. It's about identity and how we don't stay stagnant. We're not meant to just stay as one thing throughout our lives. Like that's not how life works.
But I definitely think Nyx being someone who is afraid of things that they don't understand is a really good quality in a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
That the idea that change is possible makes them have to question themselves, and they can't do that. So the other people must be the ones that are wrong.
And it's, again, another point of like how hatred and fear are so tied together that she hates because she's afraid and doesn't like that it makes her feel that way.
Yeah. Some X-Men in there.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Will, Nico, and the two Trogs set off towards Tartarus the next morning. His Majesty has taken a liking to Will, copying his hat and being overjoyed by his sun lamp.
I did like the sun lamp.
I like the sun lamp.
That,
yeah. Will is super struggling in the underworld, and Nico is struggling with how Will talks about the place. Nico is happily surprised, however, when Will says he'd like to meet Hades someday. They run into Menoetes, the bullman and farmer of the underworld. He blackmails them and demands they sneak into Persephone's garden to steal fruit for his boyfriend, Geryon.
So this was another one great callback
yeah.
for longtime people. I never thought we would hear about
anything
Geryon at all. Never mind that he's a boyfriend of someone and has reformed.
Yeah.
So good. Great stuff. I love that part of this book was just like, and they're gay now. Like, it felt really gleeful, like in a great way to me. Again, like getting to this point of like, people change. Like, people might not be who you expect them to be.
Oh, that reminds me that I had written earlier in the outline. They quickly name check a few people who have come out since Nico came out, and they mention I think the head counselor of Athena Cabin after Annabeth, Jake Mason, who was the guy who got burned by Festus and showed Leo around when Leo first got to Camp Half-Blood. And then who was the third person?
Was it Paolo?
Oh, Paolo was the third person,
With the Brazil flag.
Yeah. So, fun little thing.
Yeah, it's really wholesome and nice.
Yeah.
And so scrolling back to that because I went back up to look at at your thing. So Solangelo sneaks into the garden and steals some pomegranates, but Persephone freezes Nico to chat with Will. Got to meet the boyfriend. Will questions how she grew to love the underworld and Hades, and she gives him relationship advice. She says sometimes he shouldn't try to brighten up Nico's darkness, but rather meet him on his level by showing him his own darkness.
This is one of my favorite bits from the book.
Yeah.
I think that, it really sums up a lot of the themes well here. I also think that they did a pretty good job of managing the problematic nature of the Persephone tale, being like, hey, don't use me as an example. Like, it worked out for me, but that doesn't mean it's okay.
Brilliant. Just great. Like, tackling this head on. That was the smartest thing this duo could have possibly done. I thought, I agree. This is one of my favorite pieces, and that was brilliant.
And I really like the messaging about how different people need comforting in different ways. I think that's definitely a sort of adult relationship thing, but it could be not romantic. It can be any sort of relationship.
Yeah.
But the idea of they don't necessarily want you to try to talk them out of their dark feelings. Sometimes they just need you to be in that place with them.
Yeah.
I think was great.
Yeah.
There's a scene early on in the book, I think, where Will, it's like after that first nightmare, Will asks Nico whether it's okay for him to hug him. And I highlighted it because I think it shows something so awesome about this, like, up and coming generations, like, way more mature understandings of consent than I think we had when we were that age. Like, because it's actually getting taught, and it's getting talked about in books like this. And I'm just like so thrilled and excited to see that sort of like understanding of each other's boundaries being just a really natural part of their day to day.
There's some really great lessons in here.
That's it for part 1. We'll be back next week with part 2. And may the gods be ever in your favor. Bye-bye.